Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Evolve with Emily show. I'm your host, Emily Hayden, and for today, we have on the host of Self-Improvement Daily. It's a personal development show where you get personal development in 3 minutes or less every single day. He has over 20 million downloads in 5.5 years and counting of consistency on the show. So everybody, please welcome Brian Ford. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Emily.
Wow, 20 million downloads?
Yeah.
That is epic.
I know.
Okay, did it start in this format, meaning like little bite-sized pieces of personal development? And if so, why?
Yeah, since the very beginning, it's been that way. And
Okay.
yeah, that's because as I was actually stepping into the podcasting or actually the marketing space, I was thinking through, all right, if I'm going to be a cutting edge pioneer, best of their craft kind of person, what do I need to learn and master? And at that point, it's like, okay, well, PPC, people got that. Paid ads, people got that. Gary Vaynerchuk said something about audio and podcasting and how voice is going to be a primary platform for transacting.
I remember that.
Yeah. So that's when I was like, okay, cool. If I'm going to start creating content, might as well do the kind of most pioneering cutting edge side of it. And at that point, Gary was talking a lot a Alexa and the Amazon Alexa and everything that's going on. If you have one, hopefully it doesn't say anything.
Yeah, she's lighting up. She's like, I heard you talking about me.
I'm always careful when I got to say that. But so that actually created a flash briefing was my intention. So I was like, all right, if I'm going to become a master in this marketing space, I want to be able to have a skill set that can then support corporates or people who are looking to gravitate over into voice first services. I need to be proof of concept. I need to know how it works. So I was like, okay, cool. So if it's going to be a flash briefing, then it's got to be short. So because it's got to be every day, it's news, right? And then I kind of backed into at that point the topic where I was like, all right, well, if I'm going to be dedicating my life and my content to something that's supporting my marketing, what else can it support in my life? And that's where I was like, oh, personal development, perfect. And I was like, what is the most straightforward thing that I can call this that it makes sense? It's like self-improvement daily. And then 6 years ago, so be it. It just continued on from there. And yeah, the format has stayed the same since the very beginning.
That's epic. What's your background? Like, what were you before you were a podcast host?
Yeah. So taking you all the way back, I guess I was a student athlete. So I played college soccer. In college, I studied neurobiology and psychology. So I was kind of on the pre-med path. And a lot of my friends are doctors and it's really cool to see them on the other side of it. But I never had that real pull like they did because it's such an investment,
I know. I was pre-med as well. So I get it. I had the same thing. Once I got to the place of visiting med schools, I looked around at the doctors and everyone in their lives and I had this like reality check that I didn't want that to be my life.
Yeah.
So, okay, you decided not to go to med school.
Correct. Yeah. And that's when through the network that I'd built in the soccer team, I plugged into a medical device sales job and I was in operating rooms when I was 23 years old supporting surgeons with spine surgery. So I had this huge kind of eye-opening moment of, okay, I probably am not qualified to be here, but fake it till you make it and just like play the part and do your thing and don't get found out,
Wow.
So and then that was kind of the energy behind me exploring more of like business in general. And then that kind of pivoted into entrepreneurship. I actually joined a sports recovery technology startup called RecoverX. It was co-founded by the CEO was one of my college teammates and captains.
That's dope.
He's one of my best friends. And 3 years later, we actually were acquired by HyperIce, if you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, the massage guns and stuff. Yeah, so we sold the product that we developed, which is basically this knee wrap that's completely electric cold and heat therapy. So instead of going to a freezer and grabbing, ice or running cold water through a circulating equipment, what you do is it's just a knee brace, you slap it on, press go on a smartphone device and it gets ice cold in 60 seconds, no ice, no water. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so that was my past life in entrepreneurship. And I was everything people facing. We had 4 engineers and me basically was the team. It was a team of 5 of us. So we had some Hail Mary startup, kind of Kickstarter campaigns and got it done and got acquired. And yeah, that was a full chapter of my life for sure.
Wow. Incredible. And I love that when you decided to make this shift, this transition, you just went all in. It sounds like you were consistent for over 6 years now?
Yeah.
So most podcasts don't even make it to, do you know what the number is? Episode
Yeah, I don't think it's like 10 episodes.
I was going to say 10.
Yeah.
So people that make it to 20, I think are like the top 1%. How many episodes do you have now?
Yeah, last I checked, which was probably 2 or 3 months ago, I was over 1,800. So I'm probably getting close to 1,900 episodes.
That's insane.
That is insane. I've never said that out loud. Yeah, that's really cool.
What have you learned or how has it impacted you to have over 1,900 pieces of content that you've put out? Like what's been that growth journey like?
Yeah, well, it actually is something that you probably can like reflect on yourself, which is 5-6 years ago, the ways that I was talking about things and thinking about things, it's kind of cringy to reflect on.
Wow.
Because it's like, it is like you're just getting started and I'm doing my best at the time. And I like give myself credit for that. But now knowing what I know today and looking back at it being like, what are you doing giving advice on any of this stuff? Like you were struggling with this while you're talking about it. And that's kind of what content and creating is at some extent, right? It comes from you, which means that there's something about you that wants to express it, you know? So yeah, I mean, as it's kind of gone along, I've definitely like from more of a tactical standpoint, understood the value of systems and like kind of creating expectations and processes around high quality output. So now what used to take me, 45 minutes an episode, I now get down into 20 minutes, and I just kind of batch it all. And I've got my creative processes to be able to keep it hot.
I love that. I really relate to that because I often say that I have multiple versions of me online. And it's kind of a weird thing growing up online because if people, they'll like say, okay, I'll check out your podcast. So then they listen to episodes from, literally 4, 5, 6 years ago.
Right.
And they get this idea of you. And then it's like they meet you and you've grown so much, or maybe you don't align with those things anymore. That's not what your answer would be to a certain question anymore. So I feel like for me, it's given me this ability to have grace for myself, to accept all parts of me, because the only reason I am here is because of her. But it has really expanded my capacity for others too, to recognize where they might be at and to be able to just hold that space for them too. Do you feel like you relate to that, having been like someone on social who's shared so much of, your life and your growth online?
Yeah. I mean, that's what kind of I'm reflecting on my coaching that I do right now, where it's, you can see people's story. You can see the picture that they're within. And because we've taken the time to look at our own picture from the past version of ourselves and what we thought and said and what's on the other side of that, that helps me to then have the empathy to say, okay, cool. I don't need to try and impose or manufacture something for you, even though I see this bigger picture that you don't see. Let me help you discover it and maybe play a role in helping them discover it, but not try and impose anything that's beyond what they're ready for.
I love that you say that because that is such a good sign of a good, authentic coach who I think is doing things the right way, where you empower the individual to discover things for themselves. Like you said earlier, you started thinking differently. And when you do that, you really are empowering yourself, or in a coaching situation, you're empowering your client to be able to show up to their own life differently, even without you, which I think is like such a good marker of a good coach.
Yeah.
What is mainly the coaching that you do now? Is it based on personal development, personal growth? Is it business? What does it entail?
Yeah, no, it's definitely personal development coaching. I think my lane within personal development, because it's such a big topic and I'm happy to kind of dissect it down to what I do. I call it self-management coaching. So when people are really looking to get into better habits and routines, they are using and leveraging willpower. They're neglecting their environment. They're neglecting some of the things we're talking about, past selves and the kind of vestigial parts and the allure and pull of who you used to be, keeping you from who you're becoming. I really help people with consistent intentional action at the end of the day. And kind of my core philosophy is all around behavior tracking. So what I do is I run people through a 21-day challenge. Everyone that I work with has to go through the 21-day challenge first. You implement this core system. I call it your self-improvement operating system. It's this glorified behavior tracking system. And over the course of 21 days, you start adding new, what I call super habits. So these really high leverage asymmetrical actions that you can do that create magnified results in your life. So an example would be,
give us an example or two.
An example would be, instead of the habit being, I exercise every single day, the super habit behind that to set up your environment to exercise more consistently is, let me schedule my exercise for the week.
Love that.
Because that takes you 5 minutes to do. And then that's the plan that you then get to pull yourself into. And one of the things that I see is kind of humanity's fatal flaws is that we are so over optimized for the present moment. And especially if we're feeling emotional, if we're feeling hungry or distracted, there's anxiety or stress. If we're trying to pull out our best response in that moment, when these influences of emotion are affecting and biasing that, then we're more likely to be off alignment versus if we make that decision in an unemotional state in advance, then we can refer to that as a reference point, and then that pulls us forward and guides us with what is the actual right decision.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah. It's interesting. I relate completely to what you're saying, but I feel like you have this incredible intellectual way of describing, this thing of making this decision beforehand to make sure that you stay consistent on what you said you would do.
Exactly.
So you talk often about habits, right? Mm-hmm. What do you think is holding people back in their lives when it comes to their habits? Like, what is the biggest thing that people are struggling with?
Yeah, I mean, habits, it's such a buzzword. Like everyone in personal development, that's what they go in for, right? Like they're looking for habits. They're looking for new ways to be more consistent, because ultimately, I think one of the core problems is as people reflect on their lives and their days, it's exactly what you said. Did I follow through on doing what I said I was going to do?
Right.
And a lot of our lives are unpredictable, right? And if we have a certain standard or expectation or plan for how things want to go, and then it doesn't go according to plan, then we have this, judgmental response of, oh, well, something was wrong with me, or I didn't have enough discipline or willpower or this or that. And that's where when I think of habits, I think of it as being more based on the standards that you set for yourself. And one of my coaches, Brian Johnson from Heroic, he says that what your standards are basically bright lines that help you to stay in the right direction. So that if you compromise on a habit or a standard, I don't like the term non-negotiables, because I feel like there's always a reason and a context to negotiate on certain things that are sure acts of God at times, but still reasons nonetheless.
Yeah.
If you have these bright lines in place, then you're being intentional about choosing to accommodate or go beyond what your normal expectation is. And since it's intentional, since it's a choice to go beyond that standard, it doesn't hold the same guilt or disempowerment because it's something that you've elected to do. And with that, you haven't lost momentum because you're still following through on what you said you're going to do. Now, the choice is just different in that context. So going back to your question about habits, right? A lot of people think, oh, I need to exercise this amount. I need to track my meals this amount. I need to, spend this little time on social media, things like that.
Right.
And it's great to have the clarity of that because, having a definition gives you a target to aim for. But understanding that these habits do not exist in a vacuum. They exist within the context of our life. Now we need to be the ones that are aware of all of these different pulls and pushes and then make the choice on a moment by moment basis. And we use the standard to be that reference point that I was referring to earlier to be able to support us in doing the right thing more often.
Oh, that's so good. I love how you've broken everything down. So what about when it comes to willpower? Most people are really seeking to change their life by willpower alone. They think, I want to lose weight, so I just need to eat better. So when the chocolate cake comes around, I just have to say no and use all of my might to say no. And then some people, when they get in that moment, nothing they do helps them and they say yes. And they're back in the cycle of, cheating on their diet or, other habits that they may have that are undesirable. So for the people that are using willpower alone, what can you share with them to help them stick to what they said they would do?
Yeah. I mean, first thing I'd say is you're making it way harder than it needs to be. So willpower has this association with self-discipline. And self-discipline, I even got on my wrist, I'm self-disciplined, right? Like it's not a tattoo, it's a wristband, but nonetheless, it's meaningful to me. And this is what I give to all my coaching clients is I'm self-disciplined.
I love that.
But I'm not telling people to just be rigid and masculine and like, I need to do it this way because I said I would. What I'm telling people to do is to use intentionality to decide what discipline is. So I guess I'm explaining willpower by defining discipline. So I define discipline as the consistent habit of making the right choices to take the right actions consistently despite circumstances. So the discipline of your exercise routine is contextual because again, it comes back to the intentionality of choice. So as long as you are always following through on that best self choice that you're making within the confines of what you're hoping to accomplish, that's when you're actually expressing a healthy form of discipline rather than, oh, even though I'm sick, let me work out because I told myself I was going to.
Right.
Your body needs you to recover. That is the right thing for you to do. If your overall goal is to support your health, then working out is not doing that. But people have this idea of willpower and discipline being this rigid, non-negotiable way of thinking about things. Now, as it relates to being disciplined and I don't feel like it, that's not a good enough excuse. Totally. And that's where I think what you're referring to is that, let me just hustle, grit, grind, willpower my way through this. And that's where I'd encourage people, and this is, again, core to my philosophies, is don't think about the action itself. Think about the environment and system around the action. because environment beats willpower every single time.
Okay, explain that a little further. What would that look like in a situation?
So the super habits are a perfect example, right?
Okay.
Your environment, I'll use the same example, right? Instead of saying, okay, I need to follow through and get into the gym today. If you're just willing your way into the gym because you're like, oh, this is something I told myself I was going to do. Then when you get to the gym, you're like, oh, well, is it leg day? Am I doing upper body? Am I going to go half speed? Like, what's it going to be, right? And then because you're trying to make that decision in the moment, you're then more likely to be off alignment because of the influences and the emotions that are happening around you. Whereas if you have this system of, okay, every Sunday, I determine what I think my workout is going to be for the week. Then when you're not feeling it, you're like, okay, well, I told myself I was going to do this. And now you have a choice to build around and a reference point to use rather than starting from nothing and then trying to arrive at the right result. So it gives you more context.
I love that so much. I have exact relation and experience with that. I mean, there's days when I'll go into the gym and it's super packed. And if I don't have a plan when it's super packed, I honestly just get very overwhelmed. And it's like every single thing is taken. There's people everywhere. And I just get to this point where I'm like, I should have just come earlier. This is my fault. I'm taking the L. Right. But if I go in there with a plan and some headphones, some noise canceling headphones, and it's like often, even if it's really busy, I can get myself to just focus on the one thing that I have on my plan and then look at the next thing and go to the next. It's so much easier to stay on target that way. So totally. I also love the balance that I'm hearing in it of really honoring what is going to get you the result that you want, right? Like if you have the desire to go to the gym so that you can lose weight, be healthy, and yet you're sick, it's like, okay, well, training while I'm sick doesn't get me this healthy result that I'm looking for. So let me actually take time to rest. So I love your balanced approach in that. You talk a lot about behavior modification. I don't remember the exact term you use for it. Behavior hacking or
behavior change. Self-management, behavioral design, stuff like that.
Yeah. So what do you think is a thing that is holding people back from actually being able to change their behavior? The clients that come to you and they're sick and tired of their habits, right? But for whatever reason, they keep struggling with the same thing. What helps them to kind of snap out of it?
Yeah, 3-step process.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. And this is kind of more of like a overall protocol that you can approach and use pieces of all of it. And the more of these elements that you have, the better. And there is a progression to it to make sure that you're doing it the right way. So first is awareness. So you can't change anything that you're not aware of, right? And literally there's something called the Hawthorne effect, which is, you're aware of it. Just literally observing your behavior means that you're more likely to improve it or to be more congruent with your intention with it.
So good.
So if you're not aware of something, then it's going to continue operating off of this unconscious script in this pattern that you cannot interrupt, you cannot disrupt or choose anything else because you don't even know what's happening, right? So awareness is the first step. Another super habit to like leverage awareness, right? So instead of using willpower to eat healthy, be like, oh, well, I know the importance of macros and veggie cups and all those things, right? I'm not neglecting that. I'm saying, where can you start in improving toward that with awareness? One of the super habits is at the end of your day, reflecting 1 through 5. How was my diet today? Like literally just thinking about it. Because someone who doesn't have much experience with their nutrition, well, all they need to do is think through, oh, well, I had snacks there. I probably didn't need that dessert. Okay, I had a little bit of greens here, but healthier would have been more. And why didn't I do that? Oh, it's because it wasn't prepared. Got it. Maybe I should meal prep, right? And that's the part of awareness is you start to understand the circumstances, conditions, and context of your choices because you're thinking about them, which means the next time you encounter that moment, you're primed to notice those same factors if they're to surface again. So that's where awareness really becomes this catalyzer. And often that's enough to get people the majority of the way. I know there's a 3-step process. That's going to get you more than half the way is literally being aware of it, which is why the 21-day challenge is all about behavior tracking. You can use your own awareness through what I call as your self-improvement scorecard as like the core tool.
That's cool.
So that's step 1.
Okay.
Step 2 is action. Right? So, okay, you have the awareness. Now let's define the action. We're talking about having a game plan like you at the gym, right? It's like, if I know what I'm doing, I'm more likely to follow through on it. So if you don't have something defined, then you're more likely to try and figure out a solution, as I've been saying, that is either influenced by the present moment or it's not fully what you were hoping for. So taking the time to literally define out, I describe them as standards, right? Like, have you thought about what are your standards for social media? It's like, okay, well, I don't go on before this time and after this time. Under these conditions for business, it's okay to compromise. And what you do is you continue to get feedback on that specific action plan to then be able to inform, oh, and this is my plan moving forward. This is actually the right balance and the right fit for me, right? Because then you can optimize with the awareness and the definition that the awareness is providing you.
So good.
And then third is accountability.
Okay.
So probably the engine behind it. We have all of these great intentions and we can know exactly what we want to do. And oftentimes we don't do it anyway. And that's where accountability, from a psychological standpoint, it leverages the greatest motivational factor in our mind, which is the avoidance of discomfort or pain, right? So pleasure is, the two motivational factors are, the seeking of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. What happens with accountability is if there's someone else that has an expectation of you, they're following up on you, then there's this social confrontation moment if you don't follow through, where now what you're doing is you're feeling pain because you didn't follow through. Meaning that you take action to avoid the discomfort of that. So it becomes this catalyzing effect to get you to do what you said you were going to do, even though you didn't feel like it, because not feeling like doing that is preferred over feeling the pain of not doing it and having to report to an accountability partner or a coach or even yourself.
Absolutely. I love the way that you broke that down into the 3-step process. You're incredible at processes and systems. I can I gather that from this conversation.
It's all left brain here.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's really cool. So going from left brain to right brain a little bit, right? Let's tap into the emotional state, right? Because we can have all the best systems, we can have the best plan. But when life hits and it hits hard and we have really big emotions, how do we actually process those in a healthy way? So I'm curious if you have a system now, you know what I mean? Like hearing everything that you've experienced and everything that you're great at, do you have a system for feeling and processing your emotions?
Yeah, I'd say it mirrors what I just shared, which is the awareness of the emotion. And I mean, the buzzword, the core word, and it's true. The reason people use it is because it works, is curiosity, So it's if you're feeling an emotion a certain way, don't have any judgment over it, or try not to be attached to it, and just kind of reflect on, why am I feeling this way? What is coming up that's causing this response to be provoked? Because there's just some algorithm somewhere in your mind that's causing this, right?
That. Yeah.
So if you start to dissect that a little bit more, then you can be more aware of that trigger or of that circumstance coming up again, which then gives you a little more preparedness to respond differently or to kind of decrease the nervous system response that comes from the trigger, right?
Yeah.
So that would be my core recommendation.
Yeah.
And then, the second thing that kind of ties into this is the story, right? It's like, if you have a certain emotion, anything that you experience, anything you're trying to make meaning of, there's the story that attaches to it. So how do you be intentional about, okay, this is the unconscious story that my belief system is bringing to the surface. What is the replacement story that empowers me that I choose instead? And how do you have that be your conscious thought? Because the more you think it consciously, the more you're priming it unconsciously until that becomes the default pattern. So to talk on another super habit, this is why gratitude works. It's because what you're doing is, and part of the scorecard, it's basically a nighttime routine for 21 days where you ingrain this behavior tracking system. You can habit stack doing certain things. So one of the things that you habit stack is one of the super habits is gratitude, just reflecting 3 things that you're grateful for every single day. And the reason it works is because what you're doing is you're infusing conscious awareness of things to be grateful for that happen throughout the day. And the more that you're training your mind, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I'm doing. It takes effort at first, but you're reminding yourself, you're prompting yourself to do it. And you do it enough times, then your mind learns, oh, that must be what I value. That must be what I prioritize. That must be what I see in the world, until your lens shifts and you naturally see it unconsciously. Because, and this is a quote that I've built my whole coaching career around, you are what you repeatedly do.
So good. By Aristotle, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So if you repeatedly do the gratitude journaling, the gratitude reflection, you become a grateful person. Now, what does a grateful person do in every moment? They unconsciously find gratitude.
So good.
So that's why it's a super habit. It shifts your mindset, but all you have to do is be intentional and conscious about the action so that it creates the identity-based shift that you're looking for that actually builds the life that you want.
Oh my gosh, I just want to hand clap. It's so good. One thing I want to kind of touch on that you mentioned, you were talking about the story that you're telling yourself. And actually just last night, I was reading this book. We talked about it on the coaching call that we were both involved in with Chase Tuning. Yeah. Shout out to Chase. We love you.
Chase.
And it's a book called The Act of Being Creative, I believe.
The Creative Act.
The Creative Act. I'm a little dyslexic at times. The Creative Act by Rick Rubin.
Yeah.
And he was sharing how, what if you viewed your life like it was this movie and you're watching this main character go through the movie. And instead of being so attached to the drama, the heartbreak, the loss, the undesirable things that are happening in the movie, what if you just said, wow, plot twist. I didn't see that coming. I wonder what happens next.
Yeah.
And you had this curious approach to the movie of your life. And it said, whatever you focus on grows, right? So you zoom in on the drama, the pain, the hurt, it grows and it expands. But if you'll zoom super far out on that, you'll have such a wider perspective to what's really happening. And I just thought it was such a life transforming perspective to have, to really just look at your own life and yourself as that main character that is, going throughout their life and having plot twists. Sometimes you don't realize it. Okay, so I was checking out your podcast and there's a few episodes that I thought were super interesting. Thankfully, they're very easy to digest. But the one that I wanted to bring up is the first wall feels like the tallest. Getting started is perceived as the biggest challenge because it takes you out of the known and into the unknown. So talk to me about that. The first wall is the tallest. Why do people fear getting started? And what can you help share with them to help them get started?
Yeah, well, the first wall that you see in front of you is what has been keeping you where you're at, right? We're confined in our world right now.
So good.
And if you think about that, there's just walls in each direction. In order to break through where you currently are, you're going to need to do something different. And that's where, if you even think of the perspective of it, if you're standing near a wall, there could be a wall twice as large behind it. But if it's a certain distance away, or if you're so close and you're looking up, you might not even be able to perceive it. And that's what I'm talking about, is the perception of which wall is actually the tallest is the first one, rather than the actual wall.
Good.
Yeah, and that's all about getting started. And the reason, the second part of the quote is shifting the known into the unknown. It's because you're in your comfort zone. You see exactly how things are right now. You know that you're safe. You know that things are going to be predictable. You know that you're going to just kind of continue to reproduce the results you've been producing, right? But then when you want something different, it's this daunting, overwhelming, oh, well, if I climb this wall, I don't know what's on the other side because you haven't seen that. There's a wall that's in the way. And the reason why this wall is perceived as the tallest, because let's say you have the courage to get over that first wall and you find a second wall taller. Well, you're already in this new unfamiliar space. So even though you have to climb twice as tall, you're not twice as scared. You're less scared. You're more courageous. You're like, okay, cool. Well, this is new. That's also new. And you've started to initiate the momentum that carries you into the second task. So that's kind of the metaphor there of the walls. Is the first one's perceived as the tallest, even though there are plenty other ones that are probably harder hurdles to get over.
So true.
But you just have to start with the first one, and the other ones aren't so bad.
I think about when I started my podcast, I literally started it in my bedroom. I had this headset thing. I had a closet podcast for a while. I would record in my closet because it was the best for the sound. And I remember sitting there wanting to press record, and I kept just okay, I bought the equipment. I said I was starting a podcast. Why am I not starting the podcast?
Right.
And I was like, I feel like I should have this beautiful intro. I want it to be this perfect thing. And I think in my experience, I was allowing this idea of perfectionism to hold me back from getting started at all. And eventually I just kind of mustered it up and I was like, whatever, I just pressed record.
Exactly.
And I did an episode on taking messy action. And that first episode literally allowed me to just get my feet wet, get into it. And from there, I just started putting them out and decided that I would learn through experience.
Totally.
So do you have an example, an experience in life when you had to just kind of bite the bullet, so to speak, and do that first one, get it under your belt? And if so, what was the fear that you were feeling, and what did you feel as a result of taking that action afterwards?
Yeah. I think it happens every single day, and we're just not always aware of it, but we're doing new things every single day. I'd say one of maybe a more significant one, and I'm even reflecting on my own tracking systems, is that first action doesn't need to be this massive, disruptive, crazy action. It just needs to be the first step toward it. So one of the things that I've been able to develop in my life is a stronger money mindset. And I can go into the background of where I feel like it came from, and it's not necessarily relevant. But what I started to do was, instead of being oh, well, this is my new budgeting system and I'm going to charge myself my value because this is what I'm worth. And instead of overextending to do that really difficult first action, I was like, okay, what is this simple one that I feel a little resistance to, but I know that the consequences of me getting it wrong aren't going to be huge, and I can just kind of go for it and just do something new. And for me, that was just checking my bank account every single day.
Oh, really?
Literally looking at it.
You know, that's good because I mean, I've come a long way in my money mindset as well. And I definitely remember periods where you just don't look at it.
Yeah.
So going back to your point earlier, that's like that first step of awareness, right? It's just having that constant awareness of where you're at. So I actually love the money mindset talk, and I'd love to dive into that a little bit deeper.
Cool.
Do you come from money and positive money mindset? Did you have to do like a big transformation in that regards? If so, what did that look like?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting angle. So I did come from money. I came from an affluent town in Newport Beach.
Oh yeah, Newport.
Yeah. so yeah, I've always like had comfort, and I've always had privilege. And I didn't recognize it until I left, because I was in this bubble and it's Newport Beach. Yeah. I kind of tasted a little bit, but I was too young to really realize it because I played competitive soccer and I was playing with kids that were in gangs in LA. They were on my team,
Wow.
And they're only speaking Spanish and I'm friends with them.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, they like drive an hour and a half in and we pay for their gas and they're not paying to be on the team. But I didn't realize what that meant, how different our lives were, you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like one of the things I guess was part of my history I wasn't aware of, but then it was really evident to me when I went to college. And one of my best friends, his name's Chris. He came from the hood of Sacramento, and like he's the one white kid that talks like a black kid, he's one of those guys. And here I was from Newport Beach, preppy, all in. I've got my suitcase and I'm ready to go. And my mom's got a snack bag packed for me. He's like, you're going to college, And then this kid shows up and he drives his beat up Pontiac and he's got one duffel bag. And he's like, yeah, I don't even know that I'm enrolled yet, but coach told me to show up. It's just a totally different standard, different expectation.
Wow.
And that's when my world was really broken, where I was like, oh, wow, my upbringing is not normal. And there are many people that are different from me.
Totally.
So I think that's when I started to actually feel guilt about the privilege that I had, being like, oh, well, and this is kind of something that I've had to, work with, which was, I had all the opportunities in the world, all the privilege, all the access. Yet with that, I still made it on the same team as this kid, Chris, who came from nothing in Natomas, who was working side jobs just to be able to pay for his gas money to get to practice. And here we are achieving objectively the same thing on the same team, going to college.
Whoa.
And I was like, wow, what would Chris have done if he was in my shoes with my access? And how would I have ended up if I would have started where Chris did? And this is a divergent way of the money mindset piece coming together, because that's when I started realizing, I was like, oh, I haven't had to worry about money. I haven't had to think about money. And I'd kind of been coddled and catered and entitled in ways around that for my entire life, that I never built the skill set. I never built the awareness. Anytime I wanted something, I got it, right? And that happens enough time. You are what you repeatedly do. Then you start believing like, oh yeah, things just kind of come and happen and I don't need to work for it. It's just I deserve it because of who I am. And it creates this complex thing to when you're no longer in that same privilege and you're making you're earning for yourself, it becomes problematic, right? So those are some of the things I had to unlearn and undo and rebuild as I've, become a coach and self-employed and doing my thing.
Wow, that's such a good story. I actually have not talked to somebody who had that kind of background when it came to money. So I feel this is very valuable because like you mentioned, there was some guilt associated with it. And I can only imagine that people who have a similar background to you probably struggle in even opening up that it's a struggle.
Yeah.
Right? I could imagine there's a lot that holds them back from being honest about what they're feeling in regards to this and what they're experiencing and the insecurities that may come with that. So did you have any books that were good for you during that period, or podcasts or resources around money mindset in general? Or was this more self work that you did?
I'd say that the most transformative moment was in a coaching session that I had with someone. His name's Paul Brunson. He's got an incredible story.
Oh, cool.
Basically, I was just starting, I was still working for the startup. I had my podcast before I was kind of side hustling and moonlight and stuff like that. So I had my, a coaching session with him, and I was like, okay, let me put my first program together and see if I can do this side hustle thing, as a lot of people try and do. And it's great, but it's a lot, right?
It's a lot.
So yeah, I was kind of telling him about my idea and my marketing efforts, and I wasn't getting the traction I wanted. He's like, dude, you are super bright. You're super talented. I'm sure what you're doing is quality. What's wrong? I'm like, I don't know. You're my coach. You tell me. He's like, well, I had this problem. Maybe you relate with it. I'm like, okay, what's the problem? He was like, when I was selling people, I felt like a fraud. Do you feel like a fraud when you're selling people? And I was like, yeah, I feel like they're doing me a favor to like pay for what I have to offer. I felt like they were doing me a favor. He's like, okay. So what you're basically doing is you're recognizing that you don't have enough value to offer because you don't believe enough in what you're doing to help people to actually solve their problem. He's like, the second that you believe in what you're doing, everything else is going to click. And to this day, it's been one of the most formative pieces of advice because I ask myself, I reflect on like, okay, after the sales call or whatever it might be, did I feel genuine about the way I sold that? Do I feel like I believe in my product? Do I feel like it was a good fit for them, right? Because there's the whole psychology of sales and you can be really persuasive, manipulative if you want to. I don't like to do it that way, but I also want to be effective. I want to challenge people. So there's this dance, right? That, you know, as a coach, you need to like really ethically kind of figure out your own spot in it. So that's really like the thing I come back to most often is like, do I feel like a fraud? Like, do I feel like I'm like trying to get something from this person versus serve them? And that was kind of what set me on my path to discovering my value, which was wrapped into the money mindset piece.
What helped build your confidence when it came to being on a sales call and knowing your worth and knowing that you were going to serve this client really well? Like what helped you build that?
Results. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I undervalued myself. So I did a lot for free for way too long. And people's lives genuinely change, even though free doesn't work. I know that now. It's like, wow, people's lives are changing for free.
Yeah.
And then I started charging people and I see what's happening. I'm like, oh, this 21-day challenge thing that I got going on and this like systematic way of implementing new habits and building new life systems seems like it's working for people, you know? And now I've got enough people that I've worked with where I can stand toe to toe and be like, yeah, like this is what it does for you and this is what it costs. And I feel confident in it. So it was just results based.
Yeah, so good. Because I know there's a lot of coaches and mentors, people that listen to this, even trainers, right, that are seeking to sign up new clients. And when you're first getting started, results is the best thing that you can do to build your confidence. Because then you realize, oh, I actually am really good at this. I do get my clients results. And I think it's the best gift you can give yourself is that gift of confidence as a business owner, as a coach, a trainer, whatever position you hold. Because then you're able to show up so differently for your clients from such a grounded, confident, secure place, and giving them that space, they're able to walk into that and feel more comfortable to be vulnerable, to open up, to share their insecurities with you. So I feel like it's a gift you're giving, not just to yourself, but also to them. Yeah.
And I feel like the confidence compounds results too, because when people are uncertain and you come in with this, it will work for you. I know it will. And like, okay, like you're my coach. Yeah, let's do it. Right. And then it supports the effort. And it's kind of like an exponential curve, right? Like kind of is plateaued and it's a little bit. And then the reason it takes off and ramps up is because you've earned all of this leverage. That leverage is within yourself, with the confidence that you have. It's in the testimonials you've acquired. Like your marketing gets better. And that's why patience and consistency is so effective. You just got to kind of stick it out because all of these little bits accumulate leverage that ends up helping you to get better output for the same amount of input, you know? And that's all leverage is.
Yeah, so good. Okay, next one. Fighting loneliness. Lots of loneliness is defeated by just a little love. I think a lot of people in today's society are feeling lonely. A lot of 100%. People wish that, you know, they had their partner or a close family. It's even harder with social media, right?
Yep.
Especially around holidays. We see people with their families or spending time with loved ones, and especially those that don't have that. It can be really easy to compare. And then in that lack, feel this loneliness. So yeah, what do you have to share about fighting loneliness?
Yeah. So if I remember the tip correctly, there are kind of two different sides of it. It's if you're feeling lonely, if you want to support people who are lonely. So if you're first wanting to support people who are lonely, I think we can all relate to that time when someone reached out to us and like, hey, I was just thinking of you. And I want to say hi and I love you. It's like, it takes 8 taps of the thumb to send that. And it makes people's week.
That's so good.
Why don't we do more of that? If we're trying to like do the most effective, efficient things, like that's a super habit, right? It's like this small thing that creates this world of difference. So if you want to support people, literally it doesn't need to be that elaborate. You don't need to make that much of an effort to see them, to get them gifts, to like, you just need to see them, right?
Yes.
You just need to know that they're existing, that you're thinking of them. And for them to know that someone else cares about them, it's so inflating, you know?
Yeah. I have this friend who said he used to be very masculine, systematic about the way that he would do this, where he would like, you know, have a list of his people and on Mondays he'd text this person and whatever.
Yeah.
And he realized it was kind of random. Like he would sometimes call and like people wouldn't answer. And then he really switched into more of the like intuitive feeling of it all. And he would just sit for a moment and just close his eyes, tune into his inner world and ask like, who should I reach out to today? And he said the rate at which people would answer their phones, be able to have a conversation with him, or that actually needed someone in that moment was so much higher. And so I just thought that was really beautiful and definitely impacted the way that I seek to show up for my friends and family around me too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. I actually just had a friend literally before this reach out to me and do that for me. And it was really beautiful. So, okay. And then the second part you said.
Well, first, let me validate that because so I have a very masculine approach to this that has also become more feminine, which is it's part of my morning routine during my walk when I get my fresh air and I get my sunlight. I send a voice note of gratitude to one person in my life, right? And that's my way of helping people be seen. But I take this intuitive approach where I play roulette on my phone. I go, psh,
stop.
And then I see like of the 8 names or so, I'm like, who needs love today? And then I send the note to them. And it was even last week, one of my best friends. And like, there are certain people where I like, because it's not always intuitive. I'm like, it's not always the roulette. Like sometimes it's just like, I just want to say it to this person. I know in advance. But it was random and it ended up being my friend. And it's like roulette. Okay, cool. My friend, John. And I reach out and like, hey, John, I love you, man. I believe in you. Like grateful for your friendship. I know things are tough right now because he's got some stuff in his personal life. And he got family health news that was really bad. And he's like, funny you're reaching out. I found out yesterday that my dad's terminal. I'm like,
wow.
Oh, right. And it's like,
I have chills.
Right. And for for whatever reason, I mean, I reached out to him and gave him that support that so that like, does he feel less lonely knowing that one of his best friends is there? Like, for whatever reason, the universe has conspired to get this message in front of him in that way. It's like, he's less lonely. Yeah, he's more supported. That's kind of the side of loneliness. And then, so that was kind of the support people. On the side of feeling less lonely yourself, I think it's a depth problem, right? Like you're talking about with social media, there's the superficial version of it. And that's where I hope that the gratitude is specific enough to be a little more material than just, hey, I'm thinking of you. I'm thinking of you for these reasons and I care about you for these reasons. But ultimately, like if you're trying to seek less loneliness in yourself, and it's so hard to do because you don't feel like it, but you need to seek the depth. You need to reach out and initiate and people will receive it. Because loneliness, it doesn't need to be so lonely, right? Like it's a two-way street where if you give, you will receive, right? So that's as uncomfortable as it might be. Maybe you find your 1 or 2 your people that you check in on and they then in turn check in on you.
I love that. And I also say if you're struggling in that way, whether it's depression or anxiety or stress or just so overconsumed with your own life, go and be of service. Being of service is life transforming for the people that you're helping and also for you. And I know that recently, and I think February you actually went to Mexico and was a part of building homes, which is really cool because I went on a similar trip. Tell me a little bit about service work in your life, maybe how you got started, what it means to you and why you prioritize it in your life. Yeah.
Also, it ties into what I was sharing earlier about this life-shattering moment of going to college where I have all this privilege, I have all this opportunity, I have all this access. What do I do with it? Right? Because there was that scarce side of, am I good enough? Because I arrived here and I could have, like, do I have what it takes? If I were in Chris's shoes, would I have gotten the same place? So that was the first defaulted response. But then when I got beyond that, I got to think a little bit more about, okay, cool. Maybe I have this for a reason, right? Maybe I've been blessed with some of the things I have access to. And that's where, generosity, I really learned from my mom. Like she's the most generous person I know. So I was raised in it. And that's why my belief system helped me to alchemize that guilt into, okay, it's more of a platform and it's more of something to be of service through, right? And fortunately, I can prioritize impact in my life more than the average person because I have more financial security. So I can do more things that are just altruistic and good-natured. And of course, more returns to you when you do that. And there's a whole, lecture on why that works and how that works to be of service. But for me, it's fulfillment. It's accessing my purpose. What I feel uniquely called to do is to help those who want to help others. So I don't necessarily have that one cause on my heart where I'm like, you know what, it's international education or it's food insecurity or whatever it is. Like, I don't have that cause in my heart. My cause is, I want more people in the world on fire. And if they're on fire and they've got that cause, how do I amplify and magnify their service so that these problems do get solved? And now I'm more of a cheerleader, I'm a catalyzer rather than the one that's hands-on doing all the work, which is why I lead these house builds in Mexico, right? I go to Mexico and we have this intentional container of, cool, we are of service this weekend. Let's connect on what we really care about so that you have something to take away that lives on beyond this weekend. The house stays, but you leave the house. What do you leave with, right? So it's helping people to embrace and embody that a little bit more and then, be tangible about like the outputs of that instead of just like the intention of, oh, well, one day I want to do this again.
Absolutely.
It's like, okay, what happens now?
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. This has just been a wealth of knowledge. And if people are interested in connecting with you, where would be the best place to point them?
Yeah. So the best place to start in my world, because there are, as we talked about, almost 1900 episodes. The best place to start is to go to any most recent podcast episode. In the description, there are the 7 fundamentals to self-improvement, which are my 7 very best podcast episodes from the past that serve as the pillars that a lot of people are missing in their self-improvement. And you can just have quick adjustments, quick reframes around how these different things work. For example, willpower, or I should say environment is greater than willpower is one of the fundamentals, right? So we talked about that, things like that, so that we're orienting our lives and our growth in the right way. So yeah, Self-Improvement Daily, the podcast. You can count on me every single day coming at you.
Beautiful. That's a really incredible place to hold in people's lives too, is someone that they know that they can count on. So thank you. This has been amazing. If you guys are interested in checking him out, I'll place all of his links down below. So make sure to check him out on social media, give his podcast a subscribe, make sure to rate and review the show. That's the way that the show grows. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, do us a favor, tag us on your stories. We'd love to hear what your takeaways were. Thank you guys, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.